Hello, and welcome to Uncle John's Cabin.
Got you, bastard.
So today, I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. But last time we spoke a lot about the aesthetics, the artwork, the dream-inducing concepts and stories that you could find in these many, many worlds and inside of many, many, many rulebooks. And it's the rules in those books that I want to have a focus on today. And one of my favourite rules, it's always an optional rule. Well, I think it's now part of 5th edition, but in the 1st and 2nd, it was always an optional rule, and that was critical hit. So deep combat rules here, rules of engagement, where if you were to roll a natural 20 on the d20, so a 5% chance in combat, the natural 20 always hit. That was a rule. It always hit no matter what the armor class was. And I tried to explain the Thaco rule last video, or a few videos ago, unsuccessfully. However, a natural 20 always hits. A natural 1 always misses, but we'll get to the misses shortly. But the natural 20 always hits, and there was an optional rule for critical damage. And I believe it was, you just times it by 2. I think it was that straightforward. At least in our games, because the rules were adaptable for each household. We used to call them the house rules, where you change the rules or adapt one of the rules. But in our games, it was always double damage. But occasionally, for fun, I used to give magical weapons a special when they got a critical hit. There was one sword that did lightning damage with each hit, with like an extra d6 of lightning damage. But on a 20, it did 3d6, and the character or the monster on the receiving end was covered in a very visual spectacle of electricity. And I do that with other weapons, like I had an axe that on a natural 20 fired out like a shower of fire on the enemy. But the first real rule expansion book I read was Combat and Tactics. That's a fascinating journal, full of so many different ideas and optional, or completely optional, rules for combat, which was one of the most fun parts of the game. I mean, there's lots of problem solving, relationship management, role playing. I mean, the whole game's like based on role playing. But the combat elements, when you started to add these extra rules, it kind of video gamed it a little bit, but it was very, very fun. And the critical hits, when they expanded on that with the critical hit table, things got really interesting. So, briefly speaking, when you got a natural 20, rather than immediately doing double damage, you went to a table. Well, first of all, you had to ascertain where the critical hit was going to be. And it was a d12, and I think it's bottom leg left, bottom leg right, top leg left, top leg right, that's 4. Abdomen, chest, 5, 6. Then the arms, lower arm, upper arm, and head. I think I've missed one somewhere. But you basically roll a dice to decide. I think when we did it, we just had a d6. 2 legs, 2 arms, body or head. And then you would roll a d12 on a table. And this was the effect. So 1 to 3, nothing ill affected you. Above 3, between 3 and like 5, you started to get like minor grazes. You could break an arm, break a leg, so your movement was impaired. Bleeding, like if it's it also depended on the weapon as well. If it was a bludgeoning weapon, piercing weapon, or a slashing weapon. So you break bones with bludgeoning weapons, you'd bleed, you'd cut tendons. Got very graphic. And then 7 to 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, it was like semi-life changing. Like you would really damage a leg and it'd be months before it healed. With your abdomen, you can crush chests and you can always have issues from them onwards. Really battering up your character. And then when you got to like 12 and above, or 12 because it was a D12, you got to like missing limbs. Like if you got a slash on a leg and you got a 12, the leg would be coming off. If it was the head would be coming off, so it was an insta-kill. So they were introducing insta-kills that weren't so difficult to get. If you think about it, you have to roll a 20, that's a 5% chance. And then you have to roll a 12 on the D12, so that's 1 in 12, so whatever that is, 7%. So it wasn't rare to see insta-kills, which I believe made the game a bit more grounded. Now, my disapproval of 5th edition and its death rolls is something that can be expanded upon in a different video. But for this 2nd edition, seeing characters die, sometimes instantaneously, was not great for the player that was playing that character, and they would have to roll up a new one. But it certainly showed the other surviving players that this was a game to be taken seriously. And I believe that's something very important in the game, because if there's no real fear, then things don't seem as engaging. So when you lose a character, the next character you roll you're going to be a lot more careful with, and you're going to really fear engagements. You don't be running into every combat like it's a final fight. You want to be like really creeping around and only engaging if you know or you're confident you will win, or maybe you've exhausted all the other, or you're just role playing a barbarian and you're a great role player and you just run for the biggest thing just because you're a barbarian. But these and they also help the DM explain what's really happening. Like you hit him on the arm with your mace and all you can hear is the crunch of bones, punctuated by a man's scream. It just gives the DM something more visual, and it helps the character visualize where the hits are going. You don't need to do it for every hit, it's only criticals. Another thing that was interesting, and this came from a homebrew, so this is where people have made their own rules, and now that we have the internet, which I didn't have when I was playing in the 90s, you can submit your own homebrews, and I found a really interesting one from Hipsters and Dragons. They had the opposite. They had the critical fails table, which was really fun. I mean, it wasn't life-threatening, but however, no, maybe it was, because I do have a story to finish with. But this table had lots of things like lose your weapon, you slip, you hit yourself, or the absolute worst, if you rolled a 12, then your character would defecate themselves, which was quite a funny concept. I think there's a 75% chance it's just urine, but anyway. Lots of fun to add a critical fail element to. But you have to be careful, because there was one adventure I was DMing, and the characters were on a ship, and they'd found a treasure chest, and as cliched as it was, it turned out to be a mimic. I wanted to give them something classic, you know? And one of the characters went to hit the mimic and rolled a 1. They then rolled on the fail table, or the fail table, and they rolled hit yourself. So they rolled an attack on themselves, and they rolled a 20. They then rolled on the critical hits table, and they managed to smash their own head in with their own mace, instantly killing the character. In retrospect, actually, no. You know what? No, I do stand by it, because that's the fog of war. I think these two little fails and criticals give it a sense of real, like, how tragic an ending for a character. I'm trying to play it out in my mind. So they go the swing for the mimic, they miss. Let's say the mace hits the corner of the treasure chest the mimic was mimicking and bounces up. And by 1,000 to 1 chance, I mean, I know that probably wasn't realistic chances, but a freak accident, let's say, the character's mace comes flying up and hits them right on the temple, right on the pressure point. It's such a freak accident that this character instantly kills themselves and falls back dead. It's so beautifully bizarre, and it could only have happened with these 2 rule sets. The player certainly wasn't happy. It added that absurdism to a fight. The Battle of Hastings, it was King James got an arrow through his eye by an archer, a French archer, Norman archer. Shot him through the eye, and he was wearing a full set of plate now. I think he took his helmet off for 1 second, and the arrow hit him straight in the eye. And that's a historical example of a critical hit. The slipping and the sliding on the mud, the confusion. It's a battle. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of clanging of weapons. Your brain is racing. The adrenaline's pumping through. Critical hits and critical fails reflect that freak occurrence. So these are just 2 little things that I really enjoy. So one of them was from Combat and Tactics, 2nd edition. And the other one was a homebrew found online by Hipsters and Dragons. So if you're running an adventure right now and you really want to shake things up, metaphorically and physically, then introduce these 2 rules. I'll put a link to some pages where you can find more information. And thank you for hanging out. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.